27 years ago, at the height of the first Intifada in Israel, an IDF soldier named Gadi Rimon was shot outside of the town of Ramallah. The Arab gunman assumed he was dead and moved on. Shortly after, a young Israeli named Shlomo Bergman happened to be driving by and saw Gadi bleeding on the ground. He brought him into his car and sped off to the nearest Israeli hospital. As they wheeled him into the emergency room, the chief resident, Rafi Tekef, called for units of blood, summoned the trauma and surgical staff, and oversaw the procedure needed to save Gadi's life. Shlomo, realizing there was nothing more he could do, decided to go home. Gadi's parents arrived at the hospital minutes after Shlomo left. Several hours later, the doctors told them that the surgery was going well and that their son Gadi was going to survive. 2 weeks later, Gadi returned to his home in Ashdod. His mother, Tamar Rimon, desperately tried to find the boy who saved her son's life, but she had no way of identifying him. She made endless phone calls and hung up signs in the grocery store that they own, as well as in stores throughout Ashdod and neighboring villages. The Rimon family needed to thank Shlomo for saving their son. Almost a year after the incident, Shlomo's mother, Anat Bergman, was visiting friends in Ashdod and happened to stop by the Rimon's grocery store. At the checkout counter, she saw one of the posters and realized that this poster was describing her son. She walked over to Mrs. Rimon, who was working at the store, and asked her who put up the sign. When Mrs. Rimon said that it was her, Mrs. Bergman stared at her in disbelief. "I can't believe you are the mother of the soldier my son saved. Look at me! You don't remember me?" "I'm so sorry," Mrs. Rimon replied, "but I don't believe that I do. Have we met?" Mrs. Bergman said, 22 years ago, my husband and I were living here in Ashdod with our 2 children, and one day I came into your supermarket crying. I was pregnant at the time, and I was about to arrange with my doctor to end my pregnancy. I was crying because I did not really want to get an abortion, but felt that because of financial issues I was having, that I had to. You happened to overhear my conversation, and you and your husband sat down with me for hours. You did not tell me what to do, but were instead so encouraging and supportive. You gave me advice and guidance. You helped me figure out a financial plan. And in the end, I decided not to go through with the abortion. That precious child that I gave birth to was Shlomo." As tears flowed down both of their cheeks, Mrs. Bergman hugged Mrs. Rimon and said, "You saved my son, and in return, my son saved yours." The Hebrew word, benasnu, and they shall give, is a palindrome. The word reads the same backward as forward. The reason is because giving is cyclical. One who gives always receives in return. In the end, it will come back. You just never know how. Tamar Rimon made the decision to help a complete stranger out of pure care and concern. She did not expect anything back. Yet, divine providence orchestrated that she would receive the greatest gift, the life of her son. Giving to others is one of the greatest privileges that we have in life, and our acts of kindness create ripple effects that impact the world in ways that we can never imagine.